Lester. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of the Altered Attitudes podcast. It's the 12th of December today, but I think this will probably be going out just before Christmas next week sometime. So this is sort of our Christmas episode, and I can see Lester, looking nice and festive in the background there. Unfortunately, my office is still looking pretty bland. But we want to talk a little bit about the sort of trials and tribulations that come about, particularly for those suffering from addiction. Yeah, about being festive.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, it looks like I need it. I do have my my turkey hat that Scott, one of our treatment advisors, kindly got me, so maybe I should wear that in a little bit. All right, so yeah, Christmas is a really tricky time for those in addiction. Apparently 1 in 5 people say they drink more than they normally would over Christmas to help them relax, and I can totally see why they might, because it's a time when you get together with all your family and friends, and sometimes there are people that you wouldn't normally hang around with for an extended period of time. And as we know, alcohol's a depressant. It does relax you. But, what can this mean for people? Like, just to start off on the face of it, before we get into potentially, ways we can maybe help alleviate it. But, what might this mean for people that are potentially... I guess what I want to ask is can it trigger like underlying addictions? I know we talk about addiction as sort of like an allergy, but as somebody who's not in addiction myself, what could Christmas mean for somebody that's maybe like has a problem with alcohol but doesn't, isn't in open addiction? Is Christmas one of those ones that sort of pulls these people out of the woodwork, so to speak?
I don't think so, personally. I mean, again, there's like all different types of people, so I should think for somebody that's going to be the problem. But I think generally, in culture, that alcohol has been a massive part of celebration. Even in the Bible it talks about it. I think it's Jesus' first miracle was turning the water into wine after they'd already had a skinful. And, so again, I have nothing against alcohol or people having a good drink in celebrations or, in actual fact, I think it's a blessing if you're able to control your drinking and enjoy it. I think it's a wonderful thing that people have enjoyed since the beginning of, until they first crushed grapes. It does a lot of harm, but there's nothing really wrong with alcohol necessarily. I'm sure in the future they're going to say it's bad for you and nobody should do it at all, like everything else. I mean, it seems like life kills you in the end if you live it, but so again,
everything's bad for you, right?
Well, I think you're going to die of something. I mean, at some point. I mean, it makes me laugh, people sort of 90 years. Well, it makes me laugh, what I heard about this lady in hospital. I don't know if it's a joke, but she's like 96, and they said to her, "You got terminal cancer." She's like, "Why me?" And it's like, well, you're going to die of something at some point, but so I'm not saying abusing alcohol, but I think it's good to establish, and again, from my point of view, being somebody that has an alcohol problem, that I'm not against it, and I keep it in my house. I don't mind serving it to people. I don't mind if they get in a bit tipsy. You can see there's a big difference from somebody that's, from my point of view, spending my life sort of focused on alcoholics and alcohol and what's going on in society. But you can see a big difference when you go out with people that are just, they like a drink socially. They might even get a bit drunk, a bit silly, and probably do things they wouldn't normally do, but nothing too crazy. But you can certainly see the difference between them when they're having a drink and the people that have got alcohol problems having a drink. You can see it, up until about sort of 10 o'clock. There might not be much difference, but once the bewitching hour sets in, you can certainly see the emotional problems starting to raise to the surface. And so, I don't think for the majority of people, I think having a good drink and celebrating is probably, apart from having a headache and stuff like that, probably not the best thing in the world. But it's like food, isn't it? It's like, look, I probably eat a bit too much, but it's not like, like I'm crying over a pork chop or I'm crying over a nice cake. There's a lot of comfort that can come from food. It's a very real thing, and there's also pleasure, and pleasure's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's one of the problems that people have in um, with the idea of alcohol or drugs, because there's a pleasure part to the equation, and pleasure's important to people. And if something's going to do me, not going to be the most healthiest thing for me to do, but I get a lot of pleasure out of it. You can almost imagine a world where nobody's going to skydive, nobody's going to ride motorbikes, nobody's going to climb mountains, nobody's going to climb trees. Nobody's going to do anything that could possibly hurt yourself or anybody else, but you're going to live a lot longer. And so, I think
Long and
trying to
miserable.
strike that balance. Well, for some people, they're going to be happy because they're going to happy being miserable, I think. But it's sort of striking that balance. I mean, when I was sort of early in my spiritual journey, someone asked this question: would you rather live 1,000 years of misery or one day of pleasure? And a couple of people have actually chosen the 1,000 years of misery because their goal was to live. They didn't want to die. They wanted to live long. And I think sometimes quality of life is important. So just trying to balance it up for most people, probably drinking a bit more at Christmas and being jolly and merry, I think it's a very good thing. I think it's a necessity, to tell the truth. I think, where alcohol causes a lot of harm, it also does a lot of good. It does help a lot of people relax. It does help a lot of people, have a break from their life. There's a good element to it. I'm just against alcohol abuse. I don't use alcohol because I can't seem to control it, which usually means I end up abusing it, and then it abuses me, and then I abuse everybody else. So, it's not for me, but I'm not in any way against anybody having a good time with the use of alcohol.
Yeah. And Lester, obviously you are, you've been in recovery for what's been like 25 years now. So you've probably spent a lot of Christmases around
33.
people drinking. 33 years, there we go. I'm not even 33,
33
mate. I'm
Christmases.
32. There we
That's
go.
it.
So, and I know that, your wife will have a drink and her family and what have you. So you obviously spent a lot of time around people drinking at Christmas. And I appreciate, now it's probably it's not a problem for you, although I'm sure that sometimes there's a battle. But what sort of advice do you give to people who are maybe in early recovery around that sort of time? Because something we talk about a lot, on our blog and things, is about, like sober shaming and sober events. Do you have any advice for people out there who are in early recovery who, because you can't just hide away, right? You've got to be able to still hang out with the family and connect with people, and they will be drinking.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? It's a lot easier not drinking these days than when I started. You couldn't get a coffee in a pub when I started giving up drinking. But I think the thing is, it's the word obsession. See, now when people are usually caught up in addiction, they're in obsession. So the alcohol becomes like the number one priority in their life. And when they stop drinking, that obsession can carry on. And it's kind of like you also get like people that stop smoking. They just want to keep going on about smoking and telling everyone else to stop smoking. That for a period of time they can get on your nerves a bit. But people often are obsessed. So working in the industry as well for like pretty much the same amount of time, that it could be January when somebody realizes, you know what, enough's enough. They got to quit drinking, and the amount of people that have asked this question in January, oh, what am I going to do at Christmas? It's like they can't, and again, when you're in that obsession, you just can't kind of visualize a life without the idea of having a drink. Because again, Christmas was pretty much about drinking. I love drinking at Christmas. It probably was one of the less problem times because everyone else was kind of doing it. And so I found that for me personally, look, everybody's going to have a different experience. But for me personally, Christmas was always a pretty good time of the year because everybody was drinking the kind of quantities, at least initially, that I wanted to be drinking. And there was booze everywhere and it was fantastic. It was almost expected of you to have a good drink and get drunk over Christmas. And so again, when that realization sort of does click into your head that the game's over, and you are stuck in that very narrow-minded obsession of I can't see life without drinking, and it is a bit of a dilemma initially, but I think as you like from the 12-step point of view, as you kind of start working your program and working on becoming free from that mental obsession using the spiritual program, your mind starts to change and it becomes less and less of an issue. And again, for me personally, again, this might not be everybody's experience, this is just mine. I was on an island in Canada with 400 other people who lived on this island. And there was an AA meeting on a Monday night and a Friday night. And there was a pub and there was a lodge where obviously the lodge had a bar. If I didn't go to that pub or that lodge, there was no way of me socialising or seeing anybody. And so from the very beginning, you know, and all my friends, which again, all my friends were drinkers. So even though when I went to my first meeting, I started to make sober friends, but I also, you know, was hanging around with a lot of people that were alcoholics and drug addicts because they tend to become your peer group. But in all the years of doing this, Matt, if I'm honest, it's like, you know, I am a 12-stepper to a point. I do agree with the program mostly. I do think it's a good way to deal with the alcohol and addiction problem. But I also find that I've never found better solutions than what it says in the book. Again, may not be for everybody, because again, it's that obsession. You know, it's that idea of what am I going to do when I don't drink is one of the problems. The other one is, should I avoid all the places where people are drinking? And even in AA, a lot of the advice you're given doesn't actually match up with what the program suggests. Now, we say it's only a suggested program, but the suggestion that the program makes, I think, is good. So sort of addressing that first point of, you know, what am I going to do when I don't drink? Again, it's kind of also, I was going to kind of read from the AA book. It's on page 100, but it might be a little bit long for a podcast. But if you want to have a read of it. But in there it says, look, while you were drinking and taking drugs, you're actually starting to withdraw from life, at least from mainstream life. And it says now you're in recovery, you don't really want to continually do that. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people that don't have a program, they stay obsessed. And so they just go to meetings all the time. And in the beginning, that's suggested and probably a good thing. That instead of going where there's drinking, you should probably go to meetings. And we're blessed these days that there's in most towns and cities that there's an AA meeting on every night and sometimes in the daytime too. So there's plenty of socialising that you can do that doesn't involve drinking. But I think as a rule, and that's the words they use, as a rule, that's not a good way to carry on your sobriety. But again, going back to the idea that, you know, can't see a life without drinking, the best story I've heard was from this guy that I knew in Leeds, and really nice guy. And he was telling me one day that he kind of was in that place. His whole life was about drinking. He was like an Hell's Angel. It was all about like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And he's like, how could he carry on in his life without drink? And he did carry on being an Hell's Angel for quite a while in recovery, but that's another story. But he said one day he was kind of moping around the house because he didn't know what to do with himself. And he says, I said to my wife, I was moaning at her, what am I going to do now I don't drink? What am I going to do? Like his life had ended. And again, when you're in that obsession, that's exactly how it feels. You can't see beyond the mental obsession. And because, again, alcohol was the center of your life, drugs was the center of your life. Your whole life literally revolved around drinking and taking drugs. You take the center of your life away, it's like, well, life has no meaning anymore. And so he was in that place. And he said he's sitting there like almost with his head in his hands. And back in the day when they, before the internet, we had a thing called the Yellow Pages, which is a really thick, like, telephone directory, but it had all of the businesses and all of the clubs and dance academies and shooting and archery and fishing and shoemaking and stained glass window making. You know, it kind of had everything you could imagine in the Yellow Pages. So he's sitting there with his head in his hands, and he said this Yellow Pages smacked him on the head, and his wife pointed at it and said, "You can do anything that's in that book. Choose something and go and do it." And it's kind of like a revelation for people that almost, in actual fact, it gets to the point where it's when people say I've give up drinking, it's probably about the most negative thing you can say. To obsess people, it sounds like a good thing, but you're actually not giving up anything. It's like, what are you giving up? What you're gaining is an opportunity to do everything else, because when you're in that lifestyle, you're not doing much else. Like most people, again, there's exceptions to the rule. There's probably somebody, oh, I did all of that and still drunk. Well, good on you. But for most people, it kind of robs you of your imagination, your creativity, your desires. So you end up in a very limited experience that you're withdrawn from life. And so most of us that have found good, strong recovery and allowed our minds to recover from the mental obsession, we ended up living fantastic lives because we started going fishing, we started going dancing, we started going singing, we started traveling the world, we started building businesses, we started building families, we started being good mothers and fathers and husbands, and you know, we got back into life, what we call normal living. We crossed that bridge into the normal living that we. And so, but again, when you've got the mental obsession, it's like having a bit of a dark cloud over your head. But slowly, as you work your program and you get away from the alcohol, your brain's, the fog starts lifting, and the blinkers start coming off, and so much more starts coming into view. I mean, it's quite profound. I mean, it is like a spiritual experience. It's like your brain has been held down, and as it starts waking up, you start realizing it's almost like being reborn, which is again some of the words they use, because as the blinkers start coming off from this dark, miserable world, you start seeing, you know, we say, you know, you don't let a few dead branches spoil the beauty of the forest. You start seeing the beauty of the forest. You start waking up and smelling the coffee. You know, you start realizing, hang on a minute, I can actually succeed here. I can actually do well. I can actually be a good father, a good mother, a good friend. I can be a good employee or an employer. I can actually live my dreams. And, you know, I had a list of things that I wanted to do, and I've kind of done them. You know, I've got a new list going on now. I kind of don't do everything I kind of wanted to do. And I thank recovery for that, because I can't imagine doing that if I was drunk or drinking, because it just does something to my brain. And again, I think a lot of medications and legal drugs can do the same thing. I think it can actually rob your mind of the capacity to be creative and have ability to do the things that you want to do. I think you need a healthy brain to kind of live a healthy life, and so that sort of deals with that side of it. Um, but now the side of it, should I avoid places where there's drinking? Well, again, the advice is from the AA book. It says, assuming that we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. See, they even say that in AA quite a lot. You hear more people say, oh, you don't go in a brothel for a kiss, or you don't go, if you go and keep going in hairdressers, you're going to get an haircut. They say all stuff like that, but it's not true. And it's not what the program espouses. It's what fear talks about. And again, if you haven't got a program, maybe that's true for you. But if you have got a program, that's not true for you. See, the difference is if people can still have the mental obsession and be obsessed with being alcohol or being alcoholic, which we call dry drunk, and they have to go to 10 AA meetings a week because they believe they're powerless. See, I don't believe I'm powerless. I believe I was powerless, but now I've had a program and I've built my spirituality up. I'm now powerful. So the drink problem doesn't exist for me. I've recovered from that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Doesn't mean I can drink again. I don't believe I can drink again. I don't believe that. I believe that I'm kind of got an allergy to alcohol. So it's really not good for me to drink. Abstinence is the only way I can control my drinking. So if I don't take that first drink, then I don't have to worry. But I'm only powerless in the sense of that, and again, that's not a negative, like willpower doesn't work on everything. Like my mate says, he says, try it on diarrhea. If you got diarrhea, you can't decide not to crap yourself. Like, no matter how much, so you're kind of powerless over diarrhea. If you have a peanut allergy, you're kind of powerless over peanuts. And I think it's the same when it talks about powerless, it's about the alcohol. But so I don't see myself as a powerless person. I see myself as a powerful person. I was powerless. I'm no longer powerless. I can make a very rational decision not to drink alcohol because it has a negative effect on me. And so, but not everybody's like that. Even in 20 years without drinking, they can still have the mental obsession. And so for them, being around drinking would make them very uncomfortable, but not me. And not people like me, because the drinking problem doesn't exist for me. See, it actually states in here that I'll read on a little bit. I wasn't going to read it, but I will, because again, I just don't find a better solution. Or it says we must not. It says some people say we must not have alcohol in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking. We must not go to bars or our friends or hide their bottles. Their friends must hide the bottles if we go around their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded of alcohol at all. Our experience shows this is not necessary. So. See, but people would think that, and again, in the early days, it might be a good thing to avoid temptation because you're probably still in that powerless place. The reason it says we were powerless and not we are powerless in step one is because it's presuming that you've actually worked this program. And so if you're powerless, then you're better off avoiding it. But if you've worked the program and now you've dealt with that powerless problem, it shouldn't really matter to you whether you're around alcohol or not. It says, our experience shows this is not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. This is what I'm saying. So if you can't be around alcohol or people that are doing things like that, then there's something wrong with your spiritual condition. That you're still in that place of powerlessness. You should be in a place of neutrality once you've understood what this program's talking about. He says there is something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be some place like the Greenland ice cap. See, you can help. Look, we could get everybody off drinking drugs in England in 2 weeks, but you can't keep them off it. I mean, you've only got to chain someone to a lamppost if you want to stop them drinking. But as soon as you let them go, they're going to go drinking because there's the spiritual condition, their mental condition hasn't changed. This is about changing that condition. It's saying you can undo that twist. You can get a once you get removed from that mental obsession, which is what the program's about, then you no longer have the mental obsession. So then alcohol, if you're drinking alcohol, strawberry milkshake, if you're drinking it, it makes no difference to me. You know, it says is a Greenland ice cap, and even there, an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. Ask any woman who has sent her husband to distant places on the theory that he would escape from the alcohol problem. So again, I think most family members, they tipple your booze down the sink, they try and help you to avoid it. But it said in our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick person from temptation is doomed to fail. So that's kind of what most people do. They try and shield the person, or they try and shield themselves. But again, you're going to fail probably if you're an alcoholic with that method. You know, it says if an alcoholic tries to shield himself, he will succeed for a time. And I think most people with alcohol problem can relate to this. But he usually winds up in a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is never to avoid places where there is drinking. Now that's like, oh my word. That's not what they say in AA meetings mostly, but that's what it says in the AA book. And this is what I believe in. And again, I believe in it very strongly because it's my life experience. It said that includes bars, nightclubs, dances, reception, weddings. There must be people screaming if they're listening to this, going, no, don't tell him to go down the pub. It's like you've got to go back to the beginning here. It says, assuming we were in fit spiritual condition. There's qualifications to this. It says even plain old whoopee parties. I don't know what that is. We reckon that might be a crack party now, just where people are going to get pissed up. But this was 1930, so they called it whoopee. To a person who has had this experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, but it isn't. You will note that we made an important qualification. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, have I any good social business? So, any social reasons. So again, it's saying qualify it before you go out. Have you got any good social, business, or personal reasons for going to this place, or am I expecting to steal a little vigorous pleasure from the atmosphere? It's almost like if you can't go out after a reasonable period and you've got a program to place with a drink, there's something wrong with your condition, because this is saying you don't need to live in that condition. If you work this program, you can reach a state of mindset where you can actually still enjoy yourself. You can still go to weddings and parties and meet your mates down the pub, you know, go to Amsterdam on a stag weekend if you want. I mean, look, a lot of it I find really annoying when you're not drunk around drunk people. It's a bit annoying. I mean, my mate was dying of cancer and he wanted a reunion down in Brighton, so I went down there and, man, I wanted to nearly fight with half of them. The way they were behaving was distressing to me. You know, they were so disrespectful to people around them. They didn't realise because they were drunk, but it's not pleasant to be around. But they were alcoholic people. It's distressing hanging around with them. It's not that I want to drink. I don't want to be hanging around with people that behave so rudely and badly. And again, you end up becoming like, you know, the police for them and the mothering them, looking after them. And it's just listening to them repeating themselves all the time. It's not that I want to drink, but it's just sometimes being around people that drink like that, it's just unpleasant. And I think that's just a very normal response. I used to sort of when, you know, a lot of them were my friends and I loved them. And, but I knew that, you know, if I wanted to hang out with them, I'd get there kind of early and leave early, because after a certain point, it's just not pleasurable at all. And so, you know, but other people that are just your regular folk that sort of have a drink and a parties, you know, 2, 3 in the morning. I mean, I like to be in bed at 10 o'clock, so I don't really want to be up that late. But if I'm really enjoying myself, I've never been an absolute social butterfly, but but it don't bother me. I enjoy being at parties, in that sense, you know, and adding, you know, because as it goes on, it says, look, if you're going to sit around with a long face and be miserable, then you're better off if you don't go. Nobody wants to hear you whine, and it's like, again, it's like that smoker who's just given up smoking, don't wants to keep going on about how bad smoking is while you're having a fag. Nobody wants to hear that. You're saying if you can't go there and enjoy yourself and bring something to the occasion, then you may be better off staying away. And I think that line where it says, why sit with a long face in places where there is drinking, sighing about the good old days? If it is a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. If a business occasion, go and attend to your business enthusiastically. If you are with a person who wants to eat in a bar, by all means go to the bar. Let your friends know that they are not to change their habits on your account. At a proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. While you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. Now you are getting back into a social life of this world. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor. See, so this is saying, look, you can be absolutely free to live a really fulfilling life. That's what I love about this program. It says, look, you can enjoy everything. In actual fact, and I think from a Christmas message, it's along them lines completely. It's like, again, I understand some people have not enjoyed Christmas and they've had some terrible experiences for whatever reasons, and I'm sorry for that. But generally speaking, you know, for me anyway, as well, is that, look, I enjoyed Christmas from a young age. It's, you know, my mum left home when I was 10 years old. She used to come back, spend Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. You know, it was they made a big effort to make all the presents and the decorations and the trimmings and all the food with the trimmings. And, you know, it was a bit sad by sort of 7, 8 o'clock when she'd leave. But Christmas was always a nice time for me. I don't think in my life I've had probably had one bad Christmas I didn't enjoy, and that was in sobriety. And again, I might tell you about that in a minute. But people made an effort at Christmas, and again, I think that's the key to Christmas. Personally, whether you're an alcoholic or not, whether you're a drug addict or not, Christmas is one of them times of the year. If you're determined to be miserable and sit at home and be depressed, then you really ain't going to enjoy it, and it's probably going to make you feel worse than any other time of the year, because you can feel lonely and depressed and down and out, and there's no real reason for that necessarily. Now, I know people have grave emotional and mental disorders that make it impossible for them to go out and get involved, but my advice would be to anybody, and again, it's kind of what it's saying here, is that the more effort that you put into Christmas, the more you should enjoy it. And that is determined on the people around you, which is what ruined in actual fact, a couple of Christmases were pretty hard because somebody else was determined to ruin it, which made it very difficult. To give you a clue, in our rehab, because that's my philosophy, we'd pull out all the stops at Christmas. When people were in the rehab at Christmas, we'd put all the decorations, nice trees, all the trimmings. On Christmas Eve, we'd take over this old thatched roof, no electric church and do this really cool alternative Christmas Eve um, service, and on Christmas we'd make sure everyone had a present. We'd make sure there's nice breakfasts, nice drinks like alcohol-free mulled wine, mince pies galore. We made a fantastic Christmas dinner with all the party poppers and table decorations and sing songs. We get bands in, and because we made all that effort, which again I believe this is the same in my personal life, pretty much everybody would say that's the best Christmas we've ever had. And it's like, yeah, because it's the amount of effort we put in. Now, the year it went really bad was one of the therapists we had. He decided to be down on Christmas and he poisoned the clients with his philosophy about how bad Christmas was. And so this one year, at least half the clients wouldn't join in the festivities. And it just was the worst Christmas ever for everybody. It was depressing. And I blame that therapist for that, for his toxicity. Because the thing with festivities and celebrations, and like it's saying here, parties, business, weddings, that people want to enjoy themselves. But sometimes you have to work at that. I have to work at that. And, I've got a lot of social phobias, but I do even realise that if I went to sort of parties, if I help out, if I help collecting the bottles, pouring drinks, I kind of like taking a service position. I kind of enjoy that more. I like having a chat. I don't like a lot of loud noises. I like chatting with people. But I realised that at the core of my sobriety and the core of my spiritual life and my Christian life is that people just want to have a nice day. And I can help that process. And so that would be my advice to anybody that we're coming up to Christmas. If you're making no effort to at least help other people enjoy themselves, or you're being hard work and you're going to help ruin Christmas for other people, then you're going to feel bad. If you want to feel good, make an effort. Make an effort to do what makes Christmas nice. And a lot of people, again, over the years have thanked me for encouraging them to enjoy Christmas. And some of them said, mate, we go way overboard now and we have the best time ever. I've kind of like, re-Christmatized some people. And I quite like it because I've learned that myself. It's like everything in life, isn't it? The more effort I put in, generally, the more I get out of it. And it's But when you go to AA meetings, I used to love doing this. I'd go about this time of the year and go, "Oh, I love Christmas," and then pretty much 8 out of 10 people tell you how much they hate it, and I'm like, mate, that's a bad way to be thinking, because it comes every year, and you're missing the opportunity to have so much fun and so much goodwill. And kind of what it's about, really. It's about goodwill to all men and peace on earth and giving. Christmas to me is about, I like the idea that God is love, love is forgiving, and presence is also being there in someone's life. So it's important to be a forgiving, loving presence in people's lives. And I realise the power that I have to make your life miserable, because I did that for quite a lot of my life, make other people's life miserable. But I also realise the power I have to enhance their lives. And generally, people like you more when you're enhancing their life. So that's my top tip, is humble yourself, let go of your bar humbug, and make an effort to buy some gifts to help everybody watch some nice films. If you haven't got family and friends, then look, there's plenty of things you can get involved in churches, in AA meetings. They often have Christmas do's, they have Christmas meetings. You can always invite someone for a coffee and a mince pie, or find somewhere, I notice places, that you can have Christmas dinners, you can sign up for that and invite someone else, that may be lonely. Being inactive is the worst thing. Make an effort, no matter how hard it is. Make an effort to enjoy yourself, and the chances are that you will. And again, that's kind of the methodology that I've learned from my spirituality, but also from what it's saying here, that I'm free to enjoy myself. See, there's two freedoms in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's the freedom from. Now, a lot of people get that, but they don't get the freedom to. See, freedom from alcohol gives me the freedom to do everything else. I enjoy the second freedom and the first freedom, but I love the second freedom. I love to be living the best life that I can. And that usually entails trying to make it nicer for other people. Make the effort. If you want to be happy, if you want to be miserable, sit and whine and be a Scrooge. And I think that's it for me. Have a happy Christmas. Don't have a miserable one. It comes once a year. You can't avoid it.
I appreciate it. That's so true, and I think people probably need to hear that a little bit more, don't they? Why not have the excuse to have a good time? You're gonna connect with people. I think for me that's a massive thing with Christmas, about connecting with people. So you might not see a friend for the rest of the year, but if you can see them at Christmas, that's amazing. It's like just that reconnection again, just does something for us as humans, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I think it can be a bit hard work, but it's worth it, I think. It's worth the effort. And I've got better at Christmas as the years have gone on. You've got to practice at it.
Yeah. It's because your beard's gotten longer and you're looking a little bit more like Santa Claus.
I know, this time of the year. I look like Santa Claus. I'm getting a bit fatter and a bit redder cheeked.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll leave some notes in the show notes there, and that excerpt from the Big Book as well. I'll see if I can find that online, and I'll stick it in the show notes, and then people can have a little read on that, and maybe do a little bit of studying themselves if they're so inclined.
Cool.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mate. Happy Christmas, everyone.